strengthen NATO in terms of the military capacity of both Greece as well as Turkey, and allow Sweden to come in.
Cluster bombs should never be used. That's crossing a line.
This partisan attack by Republicans, supported by Donald Trump, is a badge of honor.
Hello, I'm Caitlin Huey-Burns in Washington. Welcome to America Decides. President Biden has arrived in Lithuania to attend the NATO summit. This is on the heels of news from NATO's Secretary General that Turkey will back Sweden's entry into the alliance. It was one of the top issues to be discussed among the leaders meeting this week in Vilnius as the war in Ukraine continues. Ahead of the summit, President Biden met with the UK's Prime Minister in London earlier today, and they reaffirmed their support for Ukraine. So for more on all of this, we have CBS News senior White House correspondent Weijia Jiang joining us now from London. Good to see you, Weijia, across the pond. A big day over there in Europe with more to come. Let's talk about this news of Sweden seeming to be on a faster track to joining NATO because of Turkey agreeing. What was behind the holdup here, and how is the administration feeling about this?
So there are a lot of players, Caitlin, in this huge game of chess that ultimately resulted in a win for several of those players, including Turkey and Sweden and the U.S. and all of the members of NATO. So bear with me. Initially, Turkey made clear that it was rejecting Sweden's push to join NATO because it felt that Stockholm was not cracking down enough on groups that it considers terrorists. And then today we had a surprise move by Turkish President Erdogan, who also demanded that the EU revisit talks with Turkey to open the door to resume their process to join the European Union. And those talks have been stalled since he took power. And so it seemed like he moved the goalpost. So today, it ultimately ended with a couple of ways. One, Sweden changed its constitution and recommitted to counterterrorism efforts, and also decided to resume arms exports to Turkey, which is something else that Turkey had been wanting. Secondly, there was a really important meeting in Vilnius, where the NATO summit is happening, between President Erdogan and the president of the European Council, who tweeted after the meeting to say that they explored opportunities ahead to bring cooperation back to the forefront and re-energize our relations. In other words, to at least crack the door open for Turkey to be reconsidered to join the EU. And so because of all of that, now you have Sweden moving ahead because Turkey has given the green light, and you have Turkey inching closer, it would seem, to joining the European Union as well. But Caitlin, on both of these separate tracks, I should add, there is no timeline, and there still needs to be worked out a lot of details before either happens, but it certainly is progress on the eve of this historic summit in NATO.
Yeah, progress indeed, especially since President Biden was saying that he was very hopeful that this would happen, but point noted about the timeline. So we'll wait and see when exactly this happens. Speaking of what's next for Biden, he is headed to Lithuania. This is a huge deal, obviously, for the NATO summit, trying to present a united front here, kind of a legacy for this president. What is on the agenda for tomorrow? What else should we expect this week?
I think there are going to be a lot of robust conversations about how to deal with Ukraine's potential membership into NATO as well. Right before leaving, the president said during an interview that he does not believe this is the right time for Ukraine to join NATO, because he is worried, essentially, that if that were to happen during the war with Russia, then all of the allies, all of the member states would have to be dragged into the conflict as well. Not all members of NATO agree necessarily. Some support Ukraine's joining a lot sooner for more protection for Ukraine, for a better chance at Ukraine achieving democracy. They'll also be talking about a controversy that has exploded back home, too, which is the president's decision to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine in the war. Now, those are canisters that are filled with several smaller bombs that, when scattered across a wide area, obviously have a huge impact. And there are members of the president's own party who point to the fact that over 100 nations ban these weapons and that they could have duds and explode at a time that is unexpected, that could possibly hurt civilians. And so that will be a topic that the president has to defend his decision on as well. So a lot to discuss, but the bottom line, you're right, Caitlin, is to present a united front again to send a message to Putin that this alliance is only strengthening by the day.
All right, Weijia Jiang traveling with the president. I know we'll hear from you later this week as you continue on covering this summit. Thanks so much for your time and reporting. And turning back here to Washington, lawmakers are back in session this week from their July 4th recess, and they have a long to-do list, and that's why we have CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joining us now from Capitol Hill. Hey there, Scott. Good to see you. So what are lawmakers hoping to get done before their next recess next month, specifically on guns? I know you have some new reporting.
Yeah, there's two different things, Caitlin. There's legislating, and then there are hearings and arguments. In terms of legislating, they'll do the things they have to do. They have to authorize the military for next year. They'll get to starting that this week. They have to approve spending bills to prevent a government shutdown. It's not clear how they're going to figure that out before September 30th and a shutdown deadline. But about those arguments and those hearings, those resume tomorrow. But let's talk about guns first. There are arguments that Congress should take up gun control legislation after all those mass shootings last week, from Fort Worth to Cleveland to Baltimore. House Democrats are pushing what they call a discharge petition, a technique the minority can use to force a debate and force a vote on anything in the U.S. House. They have a few discharge petitions in the works. They're going to keep pushing them this week. Regulations on assault weapons, background checks for more firearms sales. As of right now, they don't have the 5 necessary Republican signatures to make this happen. In fact, they have 0 Republican signatures. We're going to see if the momentum from all of these tragedies over the past 7 days changes some of the odds moving forward. But right now, those odds are bleak for gun control bills this year and likely in this Congress.
Yeah, some tough headlines over the weekend especially. Kind of switching gears, but staying with these hearings, we're going to hear from golf tomorrow on Capitol Hill. This hearing on the agreement between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf, that's expected tomorrow. What exactly are we anticipating there?
Recall, this is a huge controversy in the world of sports that now transcends sports. This controversial agreement between the PGA, the Professional Golfers Association, and the Saudi-backed and Saudi-financed LIV Golf. This has drawn a ton of consternation, not just here on Capitol Hill, but among some of the fans, among some of the players themselves. The PGA has argued it had to cut this deal with the Saudi-backed company to end a tumultuous couple of years of lawsuits, player poaching, and challenges that could have knocked the PGA out of business. But the Saudis' links to 9/11 have been a concern of 9/11 families. They have tried to lobby against this deal. They had the support of the PGA for a while, they say, in lobbying against this deal until the PGA made the agreement. Take a listen to one of those 9/11 families, Kristen Breitweiser, who says this is absolutely heartbreaking, but likely too late to stop.
We're not going to block this deal, certainly, and we are certainly not experts on antitrust policy. We leave that to Congress and Senator Blumenthal to look into. But I think our core problem with what has happened here is the feeling that the PGA used the 9/11 widows and children. They worked with us.
You heard her reference Senator Blumenthal. Connecticut Democrat Richard Blumenthal leads the hearing tomorrow. There will be some PGA officials testifying, but Caitlin, LIV Golf declined to send its executive.
Of great interest, especially to me after having watched Netflix Full Swing. I'm excited for next season to see how they cover all of this, and we'll see how Congress covers it as well. Scott MacFarlane, thank you very much for your reporting. And coming up next, Dianne Feinstein's Senate seat will be up for grabs in California in 2024, and several prominent House Democrats are looking to succeed her. One of them is Congressman Adam Schiff, and he joins us next to make his case. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. Katie Porter, Barbara Lee, and Adam Schiff are the most prominent Democrats vying to take on Dianne Feinstein's Senate seat in 2024. So far, the Schiff campaign has been dominant in the battle over fundraising. He's raised more than $8 million in the last 3 months, and for the previous quarter, brought in more than Porter and Lee combined. And California Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff, who is also running for Senate, joins me now. Congressman, good to see you. Thank you so much for being here. I want to talk about your big fundraising haul in just a minute, but first I want to get to some news of the day, specifically the Biden administration sending cluster munitions to Ukraine. One of your opponents in this race, Representative Barbara Lee, said over the weekend that the U.S. risks losing our moral leadership and wants the White House to reconsider. I'm wondering what you make of her comments, and do you agree?
I don't support the decision to provide cluster munitions to Ukraine, and I, for that matter, support very robust military support for Ukraine. I've supported the multiple launch rocket systems after, with Speaker Pelosi visiting President Zelensky early in the war. I support the provision of aircraft and other artillery, but I don't support cluster munitions. I think the danger of civilian casualties both during the conflict and after is simply too great. Last year, I supported, along with many of my colleagues, a letter to the administration urging the administration to ban cluster munitions and join the convention to ban them. So I don't support their provision.
And have you voiced these concerns over the past couple of days to the Biden administration? Is there anything that you think you could do to get him to reconsider?
We have expressed our concerns to the administration. I don't expect it's going to change their view, and I acknowledge that it was a tough decision for the administration. We need to make sure that Ukraine can defend itself, and sadly, we see the Russians using these kind of munitions. But at the same time, I think there are other ways that we can provide a robust defense to Ukraine that don't have the same risk of civilian casualties. And these are munitions I think we, out of strong principle, ought to oppose their use in any conflict and ought to seek to ban them.
You are all competing for the seat that is currently held by Dianne Feinstein, who said she's not going to run for another term. But Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, of course, said that if she were to retire early, that he would appoint a black woman to that seat. What do you say to critics who say that, this is an opportunity to diversify the U.S. Senate?
Look, I think that race and gender are going to be really important factors. I think voters will consider those factors, and I think they should. But I think they'll consider other factors as well. I think they'll consider who has demonstrated the greatest leadership in the House, who has a record of actually getting things done, who can lead California into the future, who can attack the problem of homelessness and the unaffordability of housing. I have the strongest record on these things, and I think voters should and will consider those factors too. And I'm confident that they will weigh where the priorities should be and who they want to select to represent them. But in my travels throughout California, what I'm hearing most is people are looking for someone who will get things done, who will work with others and get things done to address some real serious challenges the state has, particularly the cost of housing and the epidemic of homelessness.
I mean, getting things done, speaking of that, in terms of Dianne Feinstein, she still has, over a year left on her term. Are you confident that she can serve this out?
I'm confident based on, my conversations with her and our work with her office. She got one of my bills recently through the Resources Committee to double the size of the Santa Monica Mountains Recreation Area. We continue to work together on appropriations issues to bring money back to California. I'm also deeply concerned, frankly, that were she to leave before the end of her term, the Republicans are going to fill her seat on the Judiciary Committee because they want to stop Biden from appointing judges. And I think the only way those judges get appointed is if she's there to vote for them. And she has been doing that, and I'm glad that she is. So that too is a concern for me were she to leave before the end of her term.
But in terms of kind of Newsom setting this pledge, how much do you think that's kind of held up this whole process and perhaps made Democrats less eager to see her replaced before the end of her term?
I don't think it has really affected things. Senator Feinstein has made the decision she's going to finish her term and then she's going to retire after that. So I don't think it was a factor in her decision. I do think that the voters in California want to make this judgment, this decision for themselves. And I think that does weigh on the governor. I think he's appreciative of the fact that having appointed one of our senators, the voters really want to decide this. But at the end of the day, I think Senator Feinstein has made the decision that she's finishing her term. And that obviously will be decisive. And the primary, frankly, is just in March. So it's a matter of months away, and we're all working hard to make the case to the California people.
And talking about some of your work back on the House side, I think our viewers will know that just recently House Republicans censured you just last month for your actions while leading the investigations into then President Trump. Do you have any regrets or things that you wish that you had done differently while leading those investigations?
Not at all. I'm very proud of how I led both the Russia and Ukraine investigations and how I led the first impeachment trial to the first bipartisan vote to remove a president in U.S. history. I'm proud of that work. And, frankly, this partisan attack by Republicans supported by Donald Trump is a badge of honor. But at the same time, it was a terrible abuse of the House process. The day after they took up the censure resolution, they took up a resolution to impeach Biden. They're talking about taking up a resolution to expunge Trump's his impeachments, something that is impossible to do. But nonetheless, this is all their effort to revise, rewrite history, pave the way for the return of their would-be autocratic leader. And I'm proud to have stood up to them. And I'm also proud that, frankly, they're going after me because I'm effective. Folks that aren't effective, they don't worry about. And Donald Trump and his enablers in Congress feel I have been among the most effective in standing up to them when they're violating and abusing their power.
You mentioned this as a badge of honor. I'm curious, given this big fundraising haul that you had past quarter, over $8 million, do you think that this censure helped your fundraising efforts?
We were having a strong quarter already before the censure resolution, but I do think that people rallied all over California. From every county in the state, people sent in grassroots donations. We have the largest grassroots campaign for Senate, maybe in the history of the state. And I think people recognized this was an abusive process. And what's more, that they're going after me because I was effective. They respect that. They want to support that. And they want me to continue to stand up and not be silenced. So it did certainly rally people, and I'm grateful for all that support.
All right, Congressman Adam Schiff, this is a very big primary to watch. These seats don't come up very often, so we will be keeping an eye on all of it. Thank you so much for your time today. We appreciate it. And still to come, how Biden's poll numbers could affect House members in 2024. You're streaming America Decides. Welcome back to America Decides. The Republican Iowa caucuses are officially just about 6 months away. Republican voters in the state will have their voices heard on January 15th, which also happens to be MLK Day. It's the earliest start to a presidential nomination season since 2012. So for more, let's bring in former Illinois Democratic Congresswoman Cheri Bustos and former Michigan Republican Congressman Fred Upton. Love having formers on. We can talk freely about everything. I do want to talk to you because you obviously used to chair the DCCC, the Democrats' campaign arm for House Republicans, focusing a lot on the presidential race, but these down ballot races are super important, obviously, and Democrats want to win them back. The DCCC is endorsing in primaries this time around. Do you think that that's going to have any effect on the field, and how realistic is it that Democrats could take over the House?
Well, I'll tell you what is said publicly and what is done behind the scenes sometimes are two different things. Since as you introduced us, you said we're former and we can be candid.
You can be candid.
So, look, it becomes obvious the farther along you go in a campaign who's raising the money, who's getting the endorsements locally, who's getting the support, who's building the kind of team you need. And in the end, you want to make sure whoever comes out of the primary is going to be the best candidate to win in the general. And that's really what the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee is all about. You want the best candidate to run against a Republican, either to defeat a sitting Republican or to hang on to, if it's an open seat, to hang on to the seat.
So we were just talking about how Iowa could winnow the field, and essentially if Republicans are resigned to the idea that Donald Trump would be the nominee.
Well, it is going to winnow the field. It always has. But you start having these primaries pretty close together. But it helps Trump. The more people that are in, the better he is, because he's going to maintain that 30% lead, or 35% effort all throughout the process. So he's in pretty good shape as we're looking at literally about 6 months out.
And I know that you have backed a effort by No Labels to get on the ticket, get on the ballot, at least in Michigan, and they're working to get on the ballot in other states. What kind of effect do you think that has? I mean, some critics have said that that could kind of open the door for Trump.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, we're looking to get on the individual state ballots in all 50 states by the end of the first quarter next year. We just got on Utah's ballot last week. We're in play in nearly 24 states now to try and get on the ballot to get the right number of signatures for this third party No Labels. But in essence, if it's Trump and Biden and the majority of Americans say, no, we don't want a rematch again, that's what we're shooting for, to actually have a Republican presidential candidate and a Democrat vice presidential candidate. But if it's not Trump and Biden, or if Biden has a statistical lead, we'll throw the cards in. We don't have to decide until August of 24. But in the meantime, we're working to get on the individual state ballots. In New Hampshire's, we're doing a big launch next week in Manchester.
And Congresswoman, I'm wondering what you make of that as a Democrat. Is that something that you think could open the door to a Trump presidency? Would you encourage a third-party ballot?
No, I actually have concerns about it. I was a member of the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is affiliated with No Labels. In the very start of it, it started right around 2012. I was first elected in 2012, and I was very enthusiastic about it. I remember at new member orientation where all of the Democrats who are just elected before we're even sworn in, we go to Harvard at the Kennedy School of Government, and you learn about the processes. And they had a presenter. It was Mark McKinnon, actually, who's with the Circus now, the show The Circus. He presented about No Labels, and I was very excited about it. I joined as soon as I was sworn in. And now I see this as something that is going to hurt President Biden in his reelection efforts. You know, Fred, I appreciate the fact that you say that if it looks like it's going to be harmful and going to lead to Trump's election, that you'll back out. But I think it could do a lot of damage, and I have a lot of concern about it.
And in terms of the effect that Biden could have down ballot for Democrats, kind of going back to what we were talking about before, how realistic is it that Democrats could take back the House? And do you think Biden at the top of the ticket is a hindrance or a help to them, or do you think they have to run independent of it?
I do think the Democrats can take back the House. I mean, if you look at the last election cycle, we barely lost the majority. We did lose it, which is and now we're dealing with all of these massive investigations, one after the next under Kevin McCarthy's leadership. But it was, if you looked at the state of New York, where we bombed, Democrats did very poorly in the state of New York, which we should not have. They're going to be redrawing those districts. Same thing in North Carolina. We know we're going to pick up a seat in Alabama. So if you look at the map, we have the ability to actually win back the majority again. Joe Biden has a story to tell. It's a really good story. He has fought for the working class people. Just about unlike any president in at least my lifetime. And, we're doing really well on unemployment. We've got the fastest growth, post-pandemic growth of any industrialized nation. Our interest rates are starting to level off. Gas prices are going down. We're rebuilding our country, the infrastructure, unlike we have not done since the Eisenhower administration. So we've got great story to tell, a lot of stories to tell, and we just have to keep telling them over and over and over again.
Big question about whether voters are actually feeling it. Still a long way to go between now and then, and we will see how these primaries shape up, starting with Iowa as the caucus in January. Sherry Bustos and Fred Upton, thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. And that does it for us today. You can stream America Decides Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern. You're streaming CBS News.